So you're touring at churches in Australia. What was the allure of a church tour?
A church tour came about. Heavenly Sounds, who are putting on these church tours, asked me, and I said I would love to. I've done quite a few churches in the UK, and I also did a synagogue in Philadelphia, and it's just the most amazing sound. You know, there is no better sound, and I'm playing solo acoustic. I feel like it's like having a band. You know, the sound of the room is it just fills it out so much. You know, it's just a particularly lovely way to play a gig.
So it's all aesthetic, not spiritual connection to it?
Oh yeah, it's not terribly spiritual on my part, and I have to try not to swear too much. Not to say that it isn't spiritual, and I hope for some people it moves them, but you know, in that way, I hope it moves them anyway. But yeah, it's not necessarily a God thing, but it's very much a sound thing, and I think that God knew what he was doing when he built those churches, because they sound amazing.
With backstage at a church, though, how different is that to a normal backstage area?
Yeah, well, I mean, backstage at a church is kind of, you know, well lit, and it doesn't smell too bad, and there's, you know, some chairs that don't have loads of weird stains on them, and that's quite nice.
You don't go digging through looking for priest habits or anything like that?
I leave the habits alone, but I do check out what page the Bible's on, which is always interesting. Just seems quite like random, but yeah. So you know, it is intriguing though to be behind the scenes in a church.
Now, God must be on your side, because you recently lost a guitar and had it returned to you.
I did.
Can you tell us about the adventures of your missing guitar?
Well, it's been a funny old time recently, and I came back from an Irish tour, and funnily enough, we played a church out there as well, and there was me and my husband, my 2 kids, and all our luggage and all our stuff, and we piled into the car, and we were all really sick after this tour. Like, it was freezing cold. We've just had the coldest winter in, you know, Great Britain and the UK and Ireland and that whole area of the world. It's gone on and on and on. And so when it would usually be spring, anyway, it was freezing, and I was incredibly ill with this really ridiculously bad cold. And then we all got in the car, and I had to get out on the way home to go for a meeting, and my husband piled the kids in, crying and snot everywhere, and somehow my most beloved guitar got left in the taxi, and it got left in the boot. Well, we didn't know. We thought maybe in the rush it got put on the street, and then someone had nabbed it, you know, walking by, or it just was so mysterious. We put the word out to all the cab offices and this, that, and the other, but nothing happened. And then eventually a friend of mine called Mike, who's a cab driver in London and works out of Heathrow, who I hadn't seen for ages, and I just bumped into. I mean, you asked, so I'm going to tell you the whole story. He said, well, why don't I put posters up in the cab office at Heathrow? They have like a little bit where they, you know, canteen, where they have tea and stuff, and they all go. So anyway, he had the foresight to put it up in the toilet. So the guy was having a piss, and he was like that, and he was like, reading it, and he was like, I don't know, it rings a bell. Well, I was surely there that day, and I didn't think anything of it. At the same time, my manager manages a guy called Joey Barton, and they contacted him and said, he's a footballer, and said, would you tweet about this missing guitar? I've been on Breakfast Telly, I've been on I've been everywhere talking about my guitar. It's now like too late. I'm really boring with this story, aren't I? It's terribly going on and on and on. And then they found out that it wasn't at Lost Property where it should have turned up. The police wouldn't do it. Oh, it was awful. So I had all these posters made. So it was like a pincer movement. The cab driver sat bolt upright in bed, the one that had driven us, at 2 a.m. that morning, when I remember, I know why that poster made sense. It was that family with all their guitars and children, a mess. And so he shares his cab with some other guy. Now the other guy had just put it on eBay, thinking that the kind of like the coast was clear. At the same time as him doing that, there was this 2.2 million tweet by Joey Barton. My cab driver friend had the foresight to put posters up all around this canteen, and it was just like a big pincer movement, and he just got caught. And then the good cab driver, our nice cab driver who drove us, phoned up the bad cab driver and said, you got to give her guitar back. And he was like, why? And he was like, well, because it's her guitar. And so finally, my guitar, it's not here in Australia, unfortunately, but it is at home in London. And it also had my daughter's baby blanket that she's had since she was tiny. We just put it in there to kind of, on the plane.
So the moral of that story is toilets and Twitter.
Toilets and Twitter, it's all one and the same. And I know you'd appreciate that because this is online business right here. I'm just getting down with the Twitter language. That was a really long story. I'm sorry.
No, that's good, and thank you.
Sorry.
That's all we have time for. Thank you.